Thank you. Excuse me. Welcome to Town of Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for March 3rd. Can we have a call to order, please?
All right. Bill Marin.
Yo.
Kyle Oberketter. Eric Fozick.
Here.
Rob Levitt.
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfield.
Here.
Mike Horvath. Bob Kaplan. And Ben Firestein. So this is a presentation. You're not voting, so you can proceed.
All right. Great. So we have a work session on our land use code and development regulations rewrite, and I will leave it up to staff and consultants.
Yeah, just to introduce, we have Jessica Garrow here from Design Workshop, and we have Kristen Weber on the Zoom here from Design Workshop as well. Just as a brief background, the town hasn't done a full update to the town's development and zoning regulations in quite some time. We've done a series of piecemeal amendments over the years due to issues that have come up, and so we haven't done a full, there we go, came back. So we've contracted with Design Workshop last year. We selected them through an RFP process, and they have done 50% drafts to this point and have been working with a land use code subcommittee that has 3 P&Z members on it. Of those members, Bill's on the committee. The others aren't here this evening. But this evening, Jessica is going to give you an update and discuss some various topics with you.
Thanks, James. We're really excited to be with you all to run through the progress on the code update. Christian is going to share his screen with some slides, and what we wanted to do is go through just a little bit about where we have been, kind of the foundational principles of the code update, and then go through some of the key pieces that are proposed to be changed in the current 50% draft. We've got a couple of key questions that we wanted to ask you at the end, and then also welcomed and really wanted to hear any other comments and questions that you have about the update thus far. So next slide, we are a land use planning, landscape architecture, urban design firm. Our office is just around the corner here, and so we're really excited to be working in our own backyard. There are 3 key folks from Design Workshop working on the project. I am the principal and working through overall pieces. Riley Timmons is not able to be here tonight. She's our project manager. And then Christian is online based out of our Denver studio and supporting the work. You might have seen Christian from some previous meetings. He's also been working with Eric on the housing amendments that you've been going through. So that's been our team. Christian, did you want to run through a couple of these next intro slides and then I'll pick back up?
Yeah, for sure. So again, as James mentioned, Basalt has completed a full update of the development code in many years. And so these PTO code amendments over the years have kind of added up. And so now is a good point to kind of recess and do a full overhaul. So with that, I just wanted to touch on where we are in the process. So we kicked the project off in June. Currently working through the leadership meetings and have finished up a 50% code draft that we've shared with town staff and are sharing with you guys today as well. And so with that, what will come after this is our 90% draft and some more upcoming engagement opportunities where we'll be meeting with you guys again, town council, and kind of going back and forth before spring and summer of 2026, where the final draft would be administered. So gonna go through the methodology quickly with you guys. So when we first started the project, we wanted to establish a couple guiding principles for the code update. So first one is to make sure the code is clear, it does not require interpretation for the average person who's trying to use it. So anybody can open it up and master plan process, not duplicating any efforts there. So some of the high priority topics that were established were again organization usability. The average person can go in and really understand and find what they're looking for pretty easily. Integration with the ongoing amendments, as I just mentioned, the housing work that Herrera and I are working on, as well as the historic preservation work, community character design, ensuring that there's continuity between residential and commercial districts, annexation PDDs and subdivision standards, and then aligning the districts with the zoning map. So the way this the 50% draft is sort of broken out is in three categories, so it's a little easier to understand. So the first one is simple and structural. These are pretty quick, easy changes that are kind of just tightening up definitions, language, and moving stuff around in the code, and then adding visuals, so tables, charts, for just improved usability. The next two are really what we're looking for feedback on, or some of those sort of work in progress topics. So, second one, administrative processes and enforcement. This is where we're looking to consolidate and simplify administrative procedures, and where we can grant staff authority for minor approvals to speed up review processes. And then new policy concepts. These are new things that haven't been in the code. So an example of this would be the ongoing ADU work that we're doing with the full new ADU section. So these new concepts are, again, also things that looking for feedback on, and love to speak to you guys about. So I'll touch briefly on just the integration with the ongoing amendments. So as you mentioned, we're doing the ADU work, which focuses on this affordable, inclusive living goal of the 2020 master plan. And so some of these goals and sub-goals include providing housing that serves residents across a range of demographics. So one of the goals was producing 500 units of affordable and attainable housing, discouraging affordable housing projects that aren't connected to the transit system, and encouraging small-scale, higher-density starter housing. With that, another piece of the work that we did for the housing work along with EPS was creating a toolkit to preserve existing housing that supports the community to mitigate involuntary displacement of people. So this included the down payment assistance program, the revolving loan program that we proposed, as well as establishing a reliable funding source. So this was EPS's work that they did, understanding what peer communities are doing and how they're funding some of these programs. And then lastly, promoting the development of innovative and diverse housing types close to existing land and commercial transit centers. So ADUs integrated in redevelopment of existing neighborhoods or the development of big parcels, and again, encouraging small scale, higher density starter housing that's attainable for more people. So with that, just this last Tuesday, the second council reading. So these amendments have been approved. So I'll kind of roll through this pretty quickly, and we'll get into the actual code structure for the update for this 50% draft that we're working through right now. So just kind of wanted to walk through some of the larger changes of where pieces are moving around within the code, not actually changing any of the language, but just their location. So on the left column, you'll see the existing table of contents, and then on the right, you'll see the 50% draft table of contents. So as is chapter 14, there isn't a chapter 14, there's nothing located there, it's just reserved. And so because we're breaking out a couple chapters, chapter 14 in the new draft is now the annexations chapter. Chapter 15 is becoming the zoning chapter. Chapter 16 is a new chapter titled development. And so these two chapters are splitting what is the existing chapter 16 zoning, where chapter 15 becomes just the zoning districts and 16 is kind of everything else. I'll show you that in a second, but chapter 17 remains subdivisions. So again, no real change for annexation, just the numbering of the chapter. So the existing zoning chapter as is, has all the district regulations, and then so many other things that go along with it: planned unit developments, signs, mobile home parks, etc. So our idea was to sort of break this out and look at district regulations on sort of a broader level. And so what we proposed to do was breaking it out by each land use type. So as you can see, Chapter 15 now, the zoning chapter, just includes each of the districts broken out by residential, commercial, industrial, other, and then the supplementary uses that go along with them. And then this chapter 16 is most of that other stuff that was included in the zoning chapter. With the addition in red text, you can see some new articles. So again, as I mentioned, the accessory dwelling units article, and then we're pulling in some of the environmental hazards and steep slope regulations from the subdivision chapter into here. So all those natural and environmental hazard sections live together. A new thing we're introducing with this 50% draft is conditional use and special review application requirements. So special review is already within the code, but we are introducing and proposing conditional use being added to that as maybe an easier way that's somewhere in between permitted and special review, and then just administration and enforcement. Subdivisions, not much of a change here, just kind of consolidating where possible, so just one fewer article. With that, I'll pass it back over to Jessica, and we can walk through some of the changes chapter by chapter.
Great, thanks, Christian. So on the annexation chapter, these are pretty straightforward adjustments. We are updating the language to make sure that it reflects state statutes. One of the key pieces here is the addition of disconnection eligibility requirements. So if there is a parcel of land within town limits that for some reason should be disconnected and go back to county jurisdiction, there is a procedure for that within state statute, and so that has been incorporated here. That is a very much a one-off process that is unlikely to happen. It requires a very limited scope of criteria to be met, including that they have not gone forward with any development approvals that they have received from the town of Basalt. So it is truly a very limited circumstance, but wanted to make sure that that was incorporated to relate to state statutes. This 50% draft has some kind of vagaries of graphics, right? We've introduced some ideas in different sections. Within annexations, we would anticipate in the next 90% draft that we would have flowcharts and tables here to really describe what that annexation process looks like. So from a new policy concept, we've added and just clarified applicability. And we have added different annexation review criteria. This was something we talked about quite a bit with the working group, and there were some comments in those discussions that maybe go further in the review criteria as it relates to things like consistency with the master plan. So right now the draft simply says consistency with the master plan, and instead maybe going further. What do we mean by that? Is it related specifically to transportation access, housing, things like that? So that's something that we've heard and would anticipate incorporating and moving forward. Next is zoning. Zoning has some more significant adjustments. One of the actually really significant adjustments falls in this simple and structural category, which is consolidating all of the definitions across all of the chapters into one place. And so there's still some work to be done to make sure that there's no redundancy and things like that. But there's it looks like a lot of red lines, and it's actually just a kind of a relocation of things from a PUD section, a subdivision section, et cetera, into one area. We've started to include ideas about where graphics might be included to help describe things. So this would be opportunities to show how do you measure height on a slope? How do you measure height on a flat piece of land? How do you measure setbacks, things like that? So really kind of getting into some of those pieces where visuals would be helpful. We have relocated medical marijuana facilities as well as natural medicine to Chapter 6. So you'll see kind of a movement of some of those pieces from kind of the land use code portion of the municipal code into Chapter 6 of the municipal code. Similarly, we've really consolidated some of the pieces related to land use categorization while also trying to provide a little bit more detail. So on a new policy concept, we've added a new section that talks about the categorization of land uses. And so Christian sort of shared this on the outline, that we are breaking things up into kind of the larger buckets that you would typically see: residential uses, industrial uses, commercial uses, civic, and other. And then creating a list of, if in 5 years a business comes around that is not something we would think of today, there are breadcrumbs, there's direction for the town staff to be able to determine where does that fall within these land use categories, and be able to share that with the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Council, to make sure that that is in the right spot. So that is an important piece. We have also consolidated definitions around adult businesses. Because the code has not been updated in a while, it has a lot of definitions for a lot of things that, in kind of as codes are modernizing throughout the country, are being consolidated. And so that is an area that we've done some consolidation. We have updated, as Christian said, the idea of conditional uses. So the conditional use criteria and requirements are in Chapter 16, but within Chapter 15, we need to update all of the use tables that you're familiar with. And so making sure that we have the right mix of what is permitted, what is a conditional use, and what is a special use, special review use. So a conditional use is one that would come to Planning and Zoning Commission, and you would make a decision, and it would be done. A special review use would continue to have a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then final decision by Town Council. And so we've tried to outline where are some things that make sense to be in a conditional use category, and so that's included in the use tables here. Two other kind of key changes in this chapter. There is a developing resources district that is sometimes assigned to properties when they are annexed into the town, and then they need to go through a separate development plan and kind of work its way through the kind of PD process or the subdivision process. A key change is transitioning that to a legacy zone district. So keeping it in the code for any properties that are currently in the developing resources district, but not providing any new designations of developing resource district to things that are annexed. Instead, when you're going through the annexation process, you would need to identify and go through with the town what is the right zone district and development standards for that. We've also provided some language related to formula businesses or chain businesses, wanting to create some of those requirements and just clarity around those businesses. Chapter 16 is development. So a good way to think about this is these are all of the kind of typical standards that you would go through as you're evaluating an application in front of you, or staff would in front of them. Simple and structural are kind of moving some pieces out of subdivision into this section to be really clear about definitions related to development orders, what are those, and how does that work? Consolidation of hillside steep slope regulations, flood damage prevention, rivers, wetlands, and environmentally sensitive areas. Those are kind of spread out a little bit, and we're trying to consolidate and make it a little bit more simple for people to follow. From a process and enforcement perspective, there are a couple of additional and updated changes here. So providing an opportunity for consolidated review for projects with 100% affordable housing units. So on the one hand, there is Prop 123 compliance that is needed. So we've added a section that is related to Prop 123, which is the state's way of encouraging local governments to have a fast track process for projects that include affordable housing. So that is included in the code. In addition, PUDs that would have 100% affordable housing, there's a process for a potential expedited or consolidated review process. The ability to approve PUD amendments administratively is included within this section. And then we've also identified some additional criteria for parking reductions in mixed-use developments. And so allowing, through the PUD process, Planning and Zoning Commission to make an evaluation and a recommendation to Town Council about if a parking reduction should occur up to 25%, and then Town Council would be able to make that final decision. There are maybe some opportunities that we've talked through about administrative approval for parking reductions, something that's much smaller. So not the 25%, but is it a 1 space or a 2 space? So that's something that we would like to get some feedback on if that feels like it's an appropriate adjustment. And then new policy concepts are really thinking about approval standards and process standards. So within the current code, you go to a lot of different places to understand, am I going to P&Z? Am I going to Town Council? Is this administrative? What is my public notice requirement? So it's in a couple of different places. So we've consolidated all of that into one section. That's really the first section of Chapter 16 to create what we've called standard development procedures. So people can just go to the one section of the code and understand what is my public notice requirement, what is my review process. And we've created some review criteria that really should apply pretty broadly to all types of applications. It has proper utilities. It is addressing any wildfire or natural hazard pieces. So some consistency within those. As Eric has said, ADUs has been updated, and that is already part now of the code as part of kind of moving through that process, and we'll make sure that that is integrated appropriately. And then establishing particularly the conditional use and special review requirements, as I mentioned. So finally, subdivisions. Would say this is a pretty light touch, the changes to the subdivision section. And I've already mentioned it, consolidation of things that are in multiple places. So definitions are not in subdivision anymore. Those have moved into Chapter 15. Technical review committee references are moved to Chapter 2. And then vested rights is only right now in the subdivision chapter of the code, and vested rights are kind of linked to having a site-specific development plan. And so we've included that in Chapter 16 when it talks about the basic requirements for applications. So that was a lot to go through, and wanted to try to get through relatively quickly so that we could have more of kind of conversation with you and hear if there are any things that we've missed, anything else that you would like to talk through. So we have a few discussion questions to maybe prompt things that are related specifically to the different sections. So we're happy to walk through these as appropriate, or maybe pause here and see what additional comments or questions you might have at this point.
I have a general question. The design guidelines that we've been looking at for the downtown area, are those getting incorporated into this, or is that an entirely separate project?
It's separate. They're design guidelines, so similar to the way we have affordable housing guidelines, that they're still requirements, but they're going to be referenced in the code, but they're going to be a separate document.
Okay, so they're not part of the code at all. They're just
Right.
on their own. Okay.
And we'll make sure that there's the correct link, right, in the code to reference that and incorporating anything. I think the other piece that we've talked about is from a graphics perspective, does it make sense to have a similar graphics style to what's being included there? And that's something that I think we're still working through, but wanting to make sure that there's just kind of consistency amongst all of the town's documents.
I have comments if you're ready for that.
Yeah, and I can go through these questions if helpful.
I think it's an open conversation.
Okay, good, because I was part of the whole early discussion, but some of this will be reiterating what I've said before, but I kind of want to say it out in front of everybody. And some of it is somewhat new. First off, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of discouraging any sort of housing, even if transit's difficult. We've done that before, and people have gone away, and that was unfortunate. You know, it was part of a 3-mile review for like the ski company out by Elgibel, but they just didn't do it. They were gonna like increase the density, and, you know, we were really harsh on them about it, especially Susan. I was like, this is just not okay, because it's too far from transit. I mean, you could see the transit stop from there, but it was outside of our metrics, and so I felt bad that we used that and stymied, or at least it appeared that we were stymieing affordable housing by having that as a condition. This is a comment.
So I was just staring at that point, so are you suggesting that it,
that
you're
we
just
don't-
making your point now, or are you suggesting that actually
That,
get
well,
pulled out?
it was up there,
Right.
that's a thing we want to discourage, and I'm uncomfortable discouraging housing.
I'm okay with it, I mean, so.
Well, I know, no, but this is affordable housing, you know, discouraging affordable housing just because it's not close to transit. Not everyone needs to or wants to live.
No,
But with the caveat that there's the new 100% thing, if it's 100%, are they being discouraged? Versus a normal thing where we get 25% at best. I'm
Yeah,
not
I'm just-
arguing with him,
I'm just saying,
thinking-
it's like to discourage affordable housing, it seems like counter to what we're trying to do.
And I don't think that's what we're trying to do. I think that relates to the potential for parking, mixed-use parking reduction. If you're further away from transit, I think the idea is that there's less justification for the mixed-use parking reduction as,
Well, that's part of one of my further comments. I think if we're gonna have, I'm in favor of all sorts of parking reductions,
Sure.
as long as there's alternate, you know, mass transit or other mobility options available, then all kinds of parking reductions could be at least discussed. You know, and our appetite as a town for that changes over time, so I don't want to stymie it for what our appetite is now.
Yeah, and that statement on discourage affordable housing projects and residential developments that are not connected to the transit system or which do not have a well-lighted, safe protected pedestrian access to and from transit stops is from the master plan. So it's
Yeah.
part of where we're getting guidance. But I think the important piece is kind of what this conversation is that it's not a no, it's a how are you getting people around and what does that look like? And we're also going to encourage you to do 100% affordable housing whenever you can, essentially.
And I was uncomfortable with that in the master plan too, and here
Sure.
comes my next comment about the master plan.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what, are we just discussing these things, or are we making a recommendation, or like,
Right now, I'm just discussing what my ideas are.
okay,
I don't think we're making recommendations
No.
today. I think we're just a sounding board.
okay,
This is only 50%.
right.
So if there are items that you have, that you guys are split on and that we need to do more research on, or you want to have alternates brought back, this is the time to get that information.
Sorry.
Okay, my next one with the master plan connection is, I think in contrary to the code documents, the master plan is envisioned to be, but isn't always, a more living document. And I think there should be more clearly worded connections, because there is, at the beginning of each chapter is a mention of it. But I think it should be more, you know, stronger language, more shalls than coulds and things like that, you know, that the master plan is more of a guiding document, and then the town, as ideas and thoughts about from council and planning commissions change over time, that could be reflected that way, as opposed to trying to change too many documents. You change one and it
Yeah.
reflects in the other. My next comment is ADU acceleration. I think that's a great idea. We've talked about this before, but I'm uncomfortable with ADU acceleration if there's not a residency requirement. Because, you know, if you're gonna get something like that, you should give something. You know, if it's just part of the regular review process, then it's just part of the regular review process. But if you're gonna get an accelerated process, the town should get something for that.
piggybacking on that, is there residency requirements talked about in other places in general? I know it's come up now several times here, came up with the big development down the road. Is that something that we should look at?
Well, in terms of the ADU requirements, we did bring up with council the P&Z recommendation and had a discussion at second reading with them about that. They chose not to add the residency requirement for the standard units, just for the units that were part of the incentive program. But I would guess that the conversation there is probably not done on that topic, and probably will get more evaluation as part of the larger code rewrite.
As long as the point I'm making is brought forward.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah, Bill?
do you have more comments about?
Well, I did, I know, it was about the residency requirements that we talked about, and if this is the appropriate place, but is this even the document that we would want to discuss? You know, it talked about having smaller units, you know, local, or first-time homeowners, but there's nothing stopping people from Denver from buying those units. And that's the struggle that we have every time we have one of these conversations. Is this the place, you know, to have that conversation?
Are you talking about
It
like
is.
micro-housing?
Even if it's micro-housing, there's nothing stopping people from Denver from buying it for the weekend. So I want it, you know, if it's workforce housing, then I want it to go to the local workforce. And can we work that into the,
That's what I'm trying to get to with the ADUs, you know.
which is why I brought it up now, exactly.
Yeah, that's my point too.
Yeah, and
Cindy, I think of you when this, have this conversation. Because those are being, you know, advertised in Denver.
And the code is the appropriate place to put these requirements. And I think that an important kind of principle about land use codes is it should be easy for people to do the things that you want, and it should be more difficult for people to do things that require a certain level of review, might have community impacts, or are uses you may want to be discouraging. And so making it easier for housing development to move through is part of some of the principles behind this code and some of the things that are happening at the state legislative level. So a consolidated review process, for instance, for 100% affordable housing is an important part of this. And it's for affordable housing, so it has a deed restriction and like a residency requirement with that.
Okay, another thought I had, and this came up in our last meeting, but the more I thought about it, the more I think it's important, is a data center land use.
Yeah.
You know, I could see that being used or misused by various well-meaning or nefarious characters.
Yeah.
To piggyback on that, I think the big issues are electricity use and water usage, right? So who's responsible if they're moving in? Is it us? Is it them?
Because I don't even think we have that as land use.
Probably not.
Yeah,
Not-
we
not
don't.
currently.
And I think what we would do is include it in probably an industrial land use category. And so thinking about then in our industrial areas, what might be appropriate review criteria or limitations. I would guess, and kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but that it's something that would go through a special review process as something that goes to council versus a conditional use or a permitted use. That would be my recommendation.
Another issue of mine, because it's happened to me, is historic preservation demolition. I've seen a lot of it go by the wayside over the time I've lived here, a disturbing amount of like really good, you know, square, clean, structurally sound buildings that just, you know, it's always easy to get a contractor to tell you it's cheaper to tear it down and rebuild it, because it is. And the last one was my my parking reduction given alternate modes of transit. That's all my comments.
We just talked about the historic preservation about on Midland, right?
Yeah, but that's guidelines.
Right.
The actual zoning where you control what you can demolish and what you can't isn't here.
Okay, and is it well covered? Are you comfortable that
We're
it's
50%
addressed?
right now, so
Okay.
He wants to make sure it's.
I want to make
Yes.
sure it's really covered, but
Okay.
also, that's a decision that the town has shied away from before, for a long time, about prohibiting people with historically, we don't designate any buildings historically, for one thing. So we don't really even have them. I mean, we have them on maps where we say they are, but they're not technically designated. And so once you designate them, you have more control over what happens with them, but we as a town have been loath to do that. And I think at this point where there's only a few left, that we should start at least having the discussion about doing that.
I agree.
Seems like that's another project above and beyond what this is, though. 'cause
But
you
this is the
have to-
document that controls it.
Right, but you have to have, designate people or form a committee. I mean, we don't have a historical preservation committee like up in Aspen, so it's kind of, first you have to, like you said, designate that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Decide what's of value.
it's a big discussion because like, say you have, like Hark and Telluride, which is like, a quasi-authoritarian group that has the stranglehold on the development of the town. So it's like, it can go in really bad directions too. So, it's a discussion you have to take carefully, but I think there should be hooks in our code for when we decide what to do that allows us to control the demolition of historically designated houses.
Right, but it might require a pathway to call
Yeah, I
in
mean,
place.
you're putting the cart before the horse.
That's not a discussion for here.
Right,
That's a council type thing.
right.
Yeah, and I think staff agrees with Bill that there have been issues over time. We do actually have designated structures, locally designated structures, and there are protections against demoing those locally designated. Part of the issue is that from a residential standpoint, the town has always kind of taken the position of simply doing a voluntary historic designation. There hasn't been a forced designation like you get in some other communities. And so there are some houses that are old and probably should have been historic resources that weren't historically designated because the owners chose not to voluntarily designate them. And so they had the ability to demo them because they weren't designated, which is
Yeah, but over time, as they become less and less of them, it becomes a higher and higher priority for the communities, I think, so.
I kind of agree, that at least as a conversation piece for, as we go into the next phase
Yeah.
to think through, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Rob, Cindy, anything you wanna?
Yeah, I just want to touch on, Jessica, one of us said workforce housing and you said affordable housing. Are we using those interchangeably now?
Maybe.
I mean, affordable housing is under the guidance or the auspices
Yeah.
of
Of
our,
a deed restriction.
Yes.
And, yeah.
where workforce
Yeah.
is more of a basket of low end.
Yeah, and what I would say is that in our experience in working in similar communities, kind of use the word workforce housing or essential housing, but unless it comes along with an actual deed restriction, it becomes over time less and less likely to fill that initial goal of housing the workforce. So it might on the first purchase or the first renters, but then as it kind of turns over in time, it turns more into a market rate.
Right, which was what I was asking if
Yeah.
could be addressed somewhere in here. Not just the affordable, but also the attainable. Yes, that would, that's what we're calling it. That's what we're calling it this week. Last week it was workforce. Yeah.
And our guidelines currently call it community housing, so anything that's deed restricted, whether it's category unit that has price or rent caps, or a RO unit that just has a occupancy requirement on it. That's kind of how it's been termed.
Right, and those aren't the units that I'm questioning.
Yeah.
It's the ones that
It's the
get
others.
sold to us as being workforce and don't end up housing our workforce.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, this is sort of the first time that we've updated our codes. How often should this be done? Every 20 years, 10?
Well, I think what's been happening over time is that this has had multiple different code amendments over time as needed. Doing a comprehensive overhaul is a decent thing to do. There's not a magic number, but certainly every 10 years is ideal. It really just depends. There's a lot of moving factors going on right now, right? Like the difference between Basalt being affordable as a neighborhood community or a community versus what it was 10 years ago, totally different. Where we are with our energy codes, where we are with people riding transit and taking multimodal transportation, totally different. So it's just something to maybe keep in mind as we update the master plan as well. Really, it's when staff is having a hard time negotiating how to implement and really be precise on the land use applications that are coming in front of you. And when we keep hearing kind of similar concerns, we're not interested in that. We don't want historic buildings that aren't historic being torn down. We need tools to help support those community goals.
Yeah.
And some of it is also just from a user standpoint. You know, when we get basic questions, we can't find the process in your code. All right, our code is old. It doesn't have the process lined out like a new code does. It's not user-friendly. So it's sort of one of those things.
That's all?
Cindy, any?
I don't have that much. I do kind of question the whole data center thing, which, I mean, I think data center and I think AI. I don't know what other, I mean, I guess they're like big server things. I don't know how many of those are still being built, but I mean, I think given the lack of water in our valley, which doesn't seem to be on the verge of improving, I mean, I think we want to do anything possible to discourage that type of use. I don't think our valley is in any way, shape, or form I mean, I don't know where is appropriate, but certainly not here for resource reasons. So I think whatever we do should have some, pretty strong teeth to discourage that.
For me, the thing we haven't talked about so much on the list up here is the idea of formula businesses. Is the new grocery store a formula business? Is Phillips 66 a formula business? Because those are really the only ones downtown, really. Obviously, when you go over to Willits, it's different. So, for me, I don't want to have a lot of formula businesses downtown. I don't think that's what Old Town's about. But again, how we define that, I think, is kind of becomes a factor of what that looks like.
The intent right now is to prohibit formula businesses that don't already exist in the C2 zone, which is basically along Midland. So they can exist in Willits or anywhere else, but as part of potentially retaining your charm and your historic character along Midland is prohibiting them there.
How do you define that?
There are lots of different definitions. Sometimes it's if there are 3 or more businesses of the same owner throughout space. Sometimes there are chains. We're kind of referring to using what Telluride has as a baseline for their downtown for formula businesses, which I think is the 3 or more.
And Telluride is, I think, on far end of the spectrum on the formula businesses, and sort of surprisingly, Aspen is actually a little bit further away from that. So that definition is 10 businesses or more, so a little bit more. But it includes things like a standardized branding or standardized kind of color palette, thinking about kind of drive-through businesses like the Napa Auto Parts or Grease Monkey or McDonald's, those types of things. So kind of thinking about it from those pieces as well. So having some definition around that so that it's pretty clear for staff to evaluate, is this a formula business or not? And then what Aspen does is, if you wanted to open a formula business or a chain in an area where it's not allowed, you would go through a conditional use review with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So there's an off-ramp, and so I think that's something to think about, is do you want that off-ramp? There are pros and cons to that. It is much easier to administer if it is just a no. You had to be in existence on a certain date. It makes it kind of clearer and predictable, versus the off-ramp of, you can go through this conditional use review or this special use review and kind of try to take a bite at the apple. So it just kind of depends on how you want to.
Like in
handle that.
Aspen, a formula business is Louis Vuitton and Gucci.
Sure.
Sure.
And it is,
Yeah.
by definition.
It
I'm
is.
curious, just from a planner's point of view, what happens when a town has a business that then becomes a formula business?
This is why actually Aspen went with a number 10, because they wanted to make sure Paradise Bakery was okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny, I was thinking of the Cos Bar up there,
Mm-hmm.
because the
Yep,
owner of that used to
also
write
that.
letters into the paper all the time
Yep.
complaining about chains, but yet if you look at that
Yes.
business, there's probably like 6 of them.
There's about
around.
6, yeah. So that is why they went with a larger number than a Telluride, because they, kind of, as they were going through that code
Uh-huh.
amendment process, it was, we actually have some small businesses who have been wildly successful, and we
Yeah.
want to support them and not make them kind of a non-conforming use, so.
You know, the last Pour La France just closed.
In Denver, in the airport? Really?
Really?
I was just there.
I was just there as they were taking it apart.
Oh,
I
wow.
was heartbroken.
Huh.
It is
Wonder
heartbreaking.
what's going in there.
So that being said, that is the joy of code amendments. You can start with something and then readjust it later on if it's not working in whichever direction.
Anything that's come up since we started talking that you want clarification or more input?
I guess maybe that on the formula businesses, do you have a strong feeling or a preference on kind of pick a number and that's it, or thinking about what is the process to maybe allow some of these through a conditional use review or not? Do you have a kind of gut thought on that? Because that'll help us as we move forward.
I mean, I do like the Midland restrictions in general, and then beyond that.
Yeah.
Well, if
Where-
not, are they gonna?
Yeah, you know,
Right, but do you want Willits to go? I mean, obviously you have a big coffee company there and a large supermarket chain, but do you really want Kentucky Fried Chicken and Taco Bell? And wouldn't this be the place to
Nix that.
make a suggestion? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be that it's a straight prohibition in C2, and there's a conditional use review for other areas. That could be another way to think about it. So we can come up with a couple of options to consider for the next time we're together.
Unfortunately, we're still critical mass. We're probably below a lot of the big places wanting to come in here, but if we keep growing.
Right now, you could be
Yeah.
Holiday Inn Express there and come and,
remember the whole frenzy about Trader Joe's.
I remember.
we're about to prohibit them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting.
I think that the other question that I have is related to the parking reductions piece. And so in the draft that we've pulled together, it's including 5 different criteria, and I want to just see if there's anything else that you would want to see there, if you think that these are too strict. So someone who has is requesting a parking reduction up to 25%. They need to be in proximity to transit. They, if they're providing shared parking, kind of demonstrate that there are shared parking opportunities between different uses and peak demands times for a commercial business and residents on the same parcel. That there are good, high-quality pedestrian, bicycle, and multimodal facilities, so sidewalks, bike paths, things like that. That they are implementing transportation demand management measures, so things like shared parking agreements, strategies to reduce auto dependence, unbundling the parking from the housing unit. So if you get a housing unit, you actually have to then kind of purchase or rent the parking unit, parking space, rather than just getting the parking space. And then also considering surrounding parking conditions, both on-street and off-street, to think about the spillover impacts. Is there anything else that you would want included there? Is there anything that
I think we
feels
should allow
confusing?
for off-site
Okay.
storage as well.
Yeah.
Because right now it has to be within a certain
Yeah.
limit, and I don't think that really matters as long as, some of those other conditions like transit and multimodal things are being met, then it could be off-site.
How do you define proximity to transport?
So it's typically quarter mile to half mile.
Do we want to have some kind of option to fund or support the rideshare programs?
Wasn't that was one of the options, wasn't it?
It generally says transportation demand management measures, but that we could kind of be more explicit about it, yeah.
We might agree with what I took that as, or, yeah.
Yeah.
The circulator.
Basalt
HUD
Connect.
has rules about what they consider a TOD, a transit-oriented development, so we could just use those, which I think she was talking about.
Yeah.
Quarter mile to half mile.
Great.
I mean, like Willits.
Yeah, or,
It's kind of most of town, frankly.
yeah.
It is.
Not all of it, but
Well, Willits was
Well,
built as that. No, I'm sorry, Willits Town Center.
And Jadwin.
But you see a lot of people driving around through there.
And the thing about Jadwin that I thought was a missed opportunity was that it was within a quarter mile of a BRT.
BRT, right?
Yeah, and that's what I thought was the major feature of that other one we looked at, was that it was adjacent to a BRT. So that, the BRT is a big designator, and Willis is that.
Wait, Jadwin, the one next to, by the post office?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What BRT is that near?
just Basalt.
Yeah, I mean,
Parking
that's
lot.
not,
It's within a quarter mile.
really?
Mhm.
Huh.
I had
Seems
some
farther.
I had some clients who were looking at the parcel and I measured it.
As the crow flies,
I
or if you're
can't-
walking
I
up this
can't-
way and over,
I
it's still a
can't
quarter
remember.
mile.
We've had that discussion at the code meeting too,
Okay.
because
Yep.
Ben was all hot on that.
And that's an area where it is a like wonky detail, right? Is it as the crow flies or is it the walking distance? But those are the types of things that we are still working to identify with you and with the working group to make sure that there's some clear definitions around that.
Yeah,
So,
and for different things, it means different,
yeah,
like say for when you're talking about like, a weed business next to a school, it's one thing. But when you're talking about getting to transit, it's a little looser of a designation.
Great. So I think just quickly, we'll cover some next steps. So we have a meeting with town council next week, kind of similar work session to get some of their feedback. And then we will work on refining the 50% drafts that you had in your packet today. So that's going to include updates that reflect the comments, as well as graphics, tables, and the process illustration. So starting to move from the very dry Word document to something that's a little bit more formatted and easier to use. And then as we're moving forward, working through community engagement and relying on website and potentially open houses. So those are our next steps. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thanks. And if you have other comments or questions that come up, get them to staff and we'll make sure to incorporate it in our updates. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Christian.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tristan. So next item on our agenda, commissioner comments, staff updates.
You guys, you never give me a break. You like anything up here? Just kidding. Let's see, so the candidates forum was last night. That election is coming up, I think it's April 7th. So that's in the works. And if anyone wants to review that forum, it's on Grassroots TV, and you can replay it at your leisure. I don't know. What else do we have coming up?
Well, we have P and Z meeting on the 17th of March. You'll have a public hearing on 540 Basalt Avenue for a special review for addition of a deed-restricted unit. And then you will not have a meeting, the first meeting in April, which is April 7th, election night. So we won't have a meeting that night.
Additionally, some of you may have noticed that 72 Sunset Drive has fallen off the agenda. If they come back with an appropriate amendment to their building that allows them to accommodate their proposed usage, we'll bring that back to you guys.
They're working on it. There was some back and forth today between the buildings.
Which one is that? What are they trying to do there?
So they had proposed the addition of an event space to what is currently a catering kitchen or preparatory kitchen over in the industrial district. And so they applied for a PUD amendment without actually having a space that could accommodate hosting events
Yeah, okay.
from a building code perspective.
Do you want to update
So
them
we don't need to vote to
about
continue
the
it.
proposals that came in for Cliffs?
Would love to. We received 6 proposals, 5 qualifying for Cliffs Hillside Park renovation. We have scheduled interviews with 3 of those consultants, which will be held this week and next, and those proposals will be presented to Post next weekend for a recommendation. Both staff and Post will provide a recommendation on those, and the 3 qualifying proposals will be in the Post agenda on Friday if you're so interested. The hope to bring contract to council end of this month or beginning of next. A note on the MOU?
Probably not.
Okay.
BPAC had 18 grants submitted this year. So every year that's going up about 20%. So that's really exciting. BPAC will be reviewing those at their meeting Thursday night this week, and then ultimately making a recommendation to council on some selected winners there. So that's really awesome. There's a call out to artists for consignment art pieces to go into Willits this year. So hopefully you've been able to walk around the Midland streetscape and see the pieces there. We're going to do the same thing over in the Willits area for 2026. And then in 2027, we'll be looking at securing some bigger pieces on this side. In 2028, bigger pieces over in Willits the next year. So fun stuff there. I think that's, I don't know, is there anything else? There's a work session on the WUI, the Wildfire Urban Interface Code required by the state with council next council meeting. It's a work session before 5 o'clock, just to go over the general state requirements of that and the general direction that Basalt's heading. It's a pretty big lift.
And that'll, when we have code amendments, that'll be coming to P and Z and then back to council. So.
Yeah. I think that's most of them.
Has anybody been by FedEx and see their lights at night?
Yeah, we wrote them a letter.
Okay.
We wrote them an enforcement letter. We have not received a response yet, so our next step is to contact the town attorney, and, you know, he can either require us or ask us to send another letter, or, you know, there is the potential to cite them into municipal court. We usually like to send a couple letters, though, to make sure we're on good footing.
Did they change something? Because I noticed that too.
It seems to have gotten brighter. Our enforcement letter kind of discusses the fact that the lights are not fully shielded, which is one of the requirements, and also the light output. So hopefully we can get them, you know, kind of working with us as staff to try to reduce those impacts.
Fantastic, thank you.
Able to sleep at night?
Well, my wife won't be poking me, so yes.
Have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 7:03.
Oh, man, you are good.